They laughed when my mother told me to sit by the trash can. "Sorry, sweetheart," she said, loud enough for the whole restaurant to hear. "This table's for family only." I was 27. I had driven 3 hours in heels that pinched, carrying a gift I couldn't afford, just to be humiliated like a stranger at my own mother's birthday dinner. The waiter looked confused as he pulled out a metal fold-up chair beside the swinging kitchen door. Everyone else sat on velvet-cushioned seats around a candlelit table. I nodded, pretending this wasn't new. Pretending I didn't know my place. The worst part? I smiled. I smiled through the appetizers, through my brother Nathan's third retelling of how he closed a real estate deal using someone else's idea. I smiled when Ivy, my younger sister, leaned across the table to ask if I'd ever thought about settling down, like ambition was a disease I hadn't cured yet. But when the check came, $600 of champagne, steaks, and self-congratulations, the waiter brought it to me. "She's got it," my mother said, lifting her glass. Everyone laughed. I didn't. I looked at the bill. Then at the faces around that table, people who'd never called unless they needed something, never said thank you when I sent gifts, never once asked how I was doing. The old me might have paid it. Just to be accepted. Just to be included. But that girl was gone. I pushed back the chair, stood up slowly, and said, clear and calm, "That's not my table." Then I walked out, heels clicking on marble, dignity intact. They thought they were dismissing me. But I was finally the one leaving. The silence followed me into the lobby like an echo, sharp, ringing, unforgettable. I didn't cry in the car. I didn't scream. I drove with both hands on the wheel and the windows rolled down, letting the cold night air sting my face and keep me awake. Something inside me had cracked open, but not in a broken way. It was more like something old had finally crumbled, making space for something new. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with a mug of lukewarm tea, staring at nothing. Remembering everything. The birthdays they forgot. The graduation they skipped. The Christmas gift they gave me that still had the price tag from the clearance rack. And now, the chair. The bill. The smirk on my mother's face like she'd just played the winning hand in a game I didn't even know I was in. My phone buzzed at 1:03 a.m. A message from Ivy. "You didn't have to be so dramatic." It was a joke. A joke. Right. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my laptop and created a folder. I labeled it something simple, something clean. Exit plan. Inside, I began dragging in everything that mattered: bank statements, property titles, business contracts. Because while they thought I was the family failure, what they didn't know was that I'd spent the last 5 years quietly building a life none of them had paid attention to. Real estate. A consulting firm. 2 silent partner investments. All in my name. All private. They never asked what I did. They never cared. But soon, they would care more than they ever expected. And not because I needed revenge. But because they'd already written the first chapter of my freedom without realizing it. They gave me the chair by the trash. And that's where I finally stood up. The first thing I did the next morning was call Natalie. We hadn't spoken much since college, life had taken us in different directions, but she was the sharpest attorney I knew, the kind who smiled in silk blouses and wrote clauses that could split empires. I didn't need drama. I needed precision. She picked up on the second ring. "Ria?" Her voice was cautious. "Everything okay?" I didn't hesitate. "I need to make sure I'm fireproof." A pause. "Tell me everything," she said. And I did. Every detail. The mortgage I'd co-signed years ago for my parents, the trust fund they'd quietly shifted into my name for simplicity, the power of attorney form my mother guilted me into signing after Dad's heart scare. All of it. She whistled low. "You're not just a safety net. You're their insurance policy." That hit harder than I expected. I wasn't part of the family. I was part of the infrastructure. Natalie got to work. Over the next week, she drew up new documents, separated accounts, revoked access. We created a firewall so high, even my father's accountant couldn't peek over it. Meanwhile, I stayed quiet. Let Ivy post her brunch photos. Let Nathan brag about his new investment condo. Let Mom plan her next dinner party without realizing her backup wallet had officially cut the cord. I didn't need a scene. I needed strategy. Because when people only see you as what you can give them, the most powerful thing you can do is take it all back, without saying a single word. I called it kindness. They'd call it betrayal. But in reality? It was balance, long overdue. The invitation arrived on a Wednesday, white cardstock with gold-embossed lettering. My mother's 60th birthday gala. Formal attire. Champagne served at 7 p.m. Program begins promptly at 8. It came with no note. Just a name and an address. No, we hope you can make it. No, we miss you. Just a formality, like I was some distant cousin they weren't sure they still liked. I read it once, then twice. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was so them. Pretend everything's fine. Sweep the chair by the trash under the rug. Invite me back into the spotlight only when the optics demand a full cast. They needed me now. That much was clear. I didn't RSVP. I showed up. But not as the girl they left beside the kitchen door. I arrived just as the valet opened the front doors to a chandeliered ballroom. My dress was simple. Black. Tailored. Quietly expensive. I walked in alone, but I wasn't invisible, not anymore. Heads turned. Not for the glitz or the glamour. But because I looked unbothered. Like someone who had nothing to prove and everything to protect. I saw them before they saw me. Nathan, laughing too loudly, holding court near the bar. Ivy, taking selfies beneath the floral archway, lips pursed in her signature, camera-ready pout. My parents, standing near the podium with the event planner, looking proud of the empire they believed they'd built. I didn't approach. I circled. I watched. Because I needed to see what I was finally stepping away from. A waiter offered champagne. I declined. I needed a clear head, not a fuzzy memory. At precisely 7:52 p.m., my mother took the stage. Thank you all for being here tonight, she began, voice sweet like honey and just as sticky. Family means everything to me. And tonight is not just a celebration of 60 years, it's a tribute to the people who've shaped my journey. I waited for the line. The moment. And there it was. I'd like to thank my children, Nathan, Ivy, and of course, our eldest, Aria. I blinked. She said my name. And while we've had our ups and downs, family always finds its way back together, doesn't it? Polite applause. Thin smiles. She didn't look at me. She looked past me. And that was when I knew. This wasn't an olive branch. This was a performance. And I was expected to play the grateful prodigal daughter, returning home with bowed head and folded hands. Not tonight. When the speeches ended and the string quartet resumed playing, I made my way to the edge of the ballroom. Natalie was already there, dressed in navy with her hair pinned back. She handed me a slim envelope without a word. Inside were the final copies of the trust modifications, property disclaimers, and financial disentanglements. Notarized. Filed. Irrevocable. I looked up. My mother was walking toward me, glass of champagne in hand, smile practiced. Darling, she said, leaning in as if we were about to exchange pleasantries. You look lovely tonight. So do you, I said calmly, for someone who put her daughter next to a trash can. Her smile froze. That was a misunderstanding. No, I said, handing her the envelope. This is clarity. She opened it, skimming quickly, eyes darting left to right. I saw the exact moment she realized what it was. You removed yourself, she whispered, face paling. Completely, I replied. No shared accounts. No co-signed loans. No access to any asset with my name. You'll need to adjust your estate plans. She blinked. Ria, be reasonable. This isn't how families operate. Families don't humiliate their own, I interrupted. They don't use love like a leash. And they certainly don't laugh while the person they call daughter is treated like a servant. She took a step back. What will people think? They'll think I finally stood up. My father appeared at her side, face stormy. What's going on? She tried to hand him the envelope, but I stopped her. This is for you, I said, pulling out a second letter. A list of every payment I've made on that house you said I never helped with. Every legal tie I've just severed. It's not revenge. It's receipts. His face darkened. You think this makes you better than us? No, I said. Just freer. They didn't argue. Because they knew I meant it. I walked away, not with fanfare or applause, but with peace. The kind of peace that comes when you stop waiting for someone to hand you a seat at the table and start building your own. Nathan tried to follow me. Ivy called out, Ria, don't be so cold. But I didn't stop. Because warmth isn't something you owe to the people who turned your fire into a punchline. It's something you keep for yourself. And I was just getting started. The gala ended before 10 p.m., but the storm began at midnight. I was curled on my couch, barefoot, sipping chamomile when my phone began vibrating on the table. First, a call from a number I didn't recognize. Then another. Then Ivy. I watched the screen flicker and fade, over and over, until her name blinked for the 5th time in an hour. Finally, I answered. Ria. Her voice came through frantic, all breath and disbelief. What the hell did you do? I untied myself. She scoffed. You humiliated Mom. Dad's furious. He said you poisoned the family's name in front of half the town. No, I said calmly. I handed back what they never appreciated. And I did it privately. You're the ones making a scene now. Ivy's voice faltered. This isn't just about you. There are consequences. Ah. There it was. Not concern. Not apology. Just fear. The kind that blooms when comfort starts to collapse. I know, I said softly. That's why I'm not stopping here. I hung up before she could answer. Because she wouldn't say sorry. She never had. 3 days passed before the emails started. My father's lawyer requested a meeting. My mother sent a formal letter through her accountant, requesting that I reconsider the estate divisions for the sake of family harmony. I declined both. I wasn't playing mediator anymore. Then came the article. A quiet little column in a regional business paper, nothing flashy. Just a profile about a woman who built a firm from scratch, funded affordable housing programs, and had recently separated herself from a network of ethically questionable real estate practices linked to a prominent family name. No names. No direct quotes. Just a story. But people talk. And in our town, even a whisper sounds like thunder. I didn't leak it. I didn't need to. The truth had been sitting quietly, waiting to be seen. And now, the silence was doing the loudest work. By the end of the week, Nathan's condo deal fell through. Ivy's wedding planner pulled out. My parents were asked to step down from the homeowners association board. Reputation, once cracked, shatters quickly. But I didn't gloat. I went to work. I called Natalie and doubled down on the foundation I had started building months ago: scholarships for girls raised in silence, mentorships for young women told to stay small. I funded financial literacy courses, offered career training, built resources for people like me. People who thought they had to prove their worth just to be invited to the table. I was done waiting for permission. Now I was opening the door. But freedom, as I was learning, had its own price. The calls didn't stop. My parents' lawyer sent veiled threats about long-standing obligations. Ivy left a voicemail crying about how everything's falling apart and it's your fault. And yet, not one of them asked how I was doing. Not one said, "I'm sorry." That was the part that hurt most. Not the threats. Not the backlash. The absence of care. The continued belief that my silence was a resource they could keep mining until I collapsed. They didn't understand. I had already collapsed. Years ago. This version of me was rebuilt from rubble. On the 10th day after the gala, my mother appeared at my office. Uninvited. Unannounced. I was in a meeting when the receptionist buzzed. "She says she's your mother." Should I? I took a breath. Let her in. She walked in like she owned the space, like nothing had changed. "Ria," she said, setting her designer purse on the edge of my desk. "This has gone far enough." I didn't stand. I didn't smile. I gestured to the seat across from me, and she sat tightly, like someone who'd just realized her high horse had vanished. "You made a statement," she said. "But we're family. We survived together." I studied her. "You mean, I survive so you don't have to struggle?" Her lips thinned. "You're twisting everything." "No," I said, folding my hands. "You twisted it when you used me as a buffer, a backup, a bank account with a pulse." Her voice rose. "I gave you everything. You gave me a chair by the trash." Silence. She blinked, as if remembering. "That was a joke." "No, it was the truth." "You finally said it out loud. That I'm not part of the family you put on display. I'm just the one you call when the bill arrives." She stood abruptly. "You've always been dramatic." "No," I said, rising slowly. "I've always been quiet." "That's the difference." She turned to leave, but paused at the door. "What happened to you?" I didn't hesitate. I stopped believing that love had to be earned with suffering. She left without another word. And I returned to my meeting, shoulders lighter, breath steady. Because this wasn't revenge. It was release. And this time, I wasn't the one walking away from the family. I was walking into a life where I never had to beg to be seen again. After my mother left my office, the silence that followed wasn't hollow. It was healing. I began rewriting everything: contracts, boundaries, beliefs. I ended the auto payments they never thanked me for. I redirected every ounce of effort I once poured into pleasing them toward the girls in my mentorship program, the ones who reminded me so much of myself at 17, bright, capable, and starved for acknowledgement. They listened. They showed up. They cared. I wasn't invisible with them. I was undeniable. And slowly, the ache in my chest, the one shaped like family, began to shrink. Weeks passed. I received a call from my parents' financial advisor. I let it go to voicemail. Then another from Ivy. Then Nathan. Finally, curiosity got the better of me. I answered the next call. It was the family lawyer. "I wanted to inform you," he said, "that your name has been removed from your parents' estate plan." I smiled. I figured as much. His voice wavered. "Are you okay?" "I'm free." Because the inheritance was never the prize. It was the leash. And now, they had nothing left to dangle. Months later, I stood on stage at a regional leadership summit. The room was packed: executives, entrepreneurs, policymakers. I was the keynote speaker. Me, the girl who once sat beside a trash can at a dinner table reserved for family only. I didn't tell that story directly. But I talked about the cost of silence. About the strength it takes to walk away from people who love you conditionally. About building a new definition of family, one rooted in respect, not hierarchy. When I stepped down, the applause was thunderous. I didn't need my family to clap. The world was finally listening. A handwritten note arrived one morning. No return address. Inside, Ria, we were wrong. We see that now. We miss you. It wasn't signed. But I knew the handwriting. I stared at it for a long time. Then folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer. Because forgiveness is not the same as return. Some bridges don't need burning. They need gates. And I held the key. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, I hosted dinner. Not in a mansion, but in a sunlit loft I had designed myself, open windows, warm lights, a table full of people who never made me earn a seat. Mentors. Friends. Girls from my program. People who knew my worth without needing a resume to prove it. We laughed. We shared stories. We clinked glasses not to wealth, but to peace. And as I looked around, I realized. This is my family. This is my table. And no one sits by the trash.